Chapter 5. The Attributes of a Tracker. A story I read as a boy has become a part of my personal philosophy. A party of academics and explorers were carrying out a scientific expedition in the interior of Australia, in an area those days appropriately known as the Great Thirst Land. They came out of the area alive only because a little Aboriginal girl was accompanying them. The work of the expedition had been abandoned. Its members were dying of thirst and were desperately searching for water. The girl had noticed some ants creeping up the stem of a tree and making their way into a small hole in the bark. She realized that there would be a purpose behind their activity. She pushed a twig into the hole to explore. She discovered that water was contained in the tree trunk. She then stripped the bark from some green twigs so that they formed a succession of small tubes. She fitted them together to form a drinking straw, and passed the end of this tube down through the hole into the tree, enabling each one of the party to suck up his fill of water. An illiterate 14-year-old Aboriginal girl saved the lives of the scientists. She had been able to perform her mercy mission due to powers of observation, deduction, and ingenuity. It hadn't been the sophisticated knowledge the members of the expedition had possessed that had saved them, but the natural knowledge of one who had been brought up to observe the essentials of life. These same skills are vividly displayed in the film Rabbit-Proof Fence, set in 1930s Australia. Trackers need to develop the sort of expertise that came so naturally to this young Aboriginal girl. Good trackers are characterized by their outstanding ability to observe, remember, select, analyze, and comprehend. The tracker, when observing, needs to look beyond mere recognition and go on to observe every detail. He must then remember all he's seen, smelled, heard, felt, and possibly tasted, usually without resorting to making notes. The salient points are then selected or collated for analysis. All this has to be done almost instinctively before he can arrive at correct deductions and an accurate comprehension of what has occurred. The qualities of a good tracker. Anyone using tracking skills will soon realize that he is called on to make many decisions. He will be required to draw heavily on his training and experience, but above all else, he will need acute observation, patience, and persistence. He has to understand nature. He has to keep himself at a high standard of physical fitness. He has to have a good memory with which to retain and piece together the small parcels of information, the sign left along a track. The job of potential trackers is to think for themselves, to reason out statements for themselves, to discover the whys and wherefores of an activity for themselves. They may be helped to a certain extent by the advice and experience of others, especially if they are a member of a tracking team, but they should not become dependent on others. Trackers need to be self-sufficient, free spirits. They do not blindly accept the obvious explanations. To be a competent tracker, you must develop the following qualities: patience, an inquisitive mind, honesty, perseverance, acute observation. All five senses must be well attuned, above average endurance, above average standard of fieldcraft, mental and physical determination, a good knowledge of the local fauna and flora, curiosity. Contrary to common belief, people are not born with the natural instincts of a tracker. A tracker is not a special breed of person. Trackers come from all backgrounds and nationalities. Being country-reared, although an initial advantage, does not necessarily exclude the city dweller from becoming a competent tracker. Through dedication and hard work, it is possible for anyone to become proficient in the art of tracking. Generally speaking, a tracker is normally most efficient in his country of origin. See Figure 14. Of course, in a new country, his effectiveness will depend entirely on his ability to adjust to a new environment. Once this is achieved, a tracker is able to perform to his maximum efficiency. The sooner he gains first-hand knowledge of his area of operation, the better equipped he will be to follow through each tracking task successfully. Self-knowledge. Good trackers are aware of their limitations, both in terms of fatigue and tracking ability. In short, they are honest with themselves and others. Firstly, they do not track on when tired because they know a tired tracker easily loses the track, becomes noisy and clumsy in his movements, and is less likely to see the quarry. Second, they know their skill level and are confident without being overconfident. When a track becomes difficult and you are straining to follow the track, it is easy to see sign where none exists. Students of visual tracking are particularly prone to this tendency, as in their early days. Be aware, do not bluff yourself and others into thinking you are following the quarry when you are following an imaginary track. I was told on my tracking course that I had to be prepared to follow a track for days and that it could be hard, frustrating work with many false trails, but that if I was destined to be a good tracker, eventually everything would click into place. There were others on the course who, by their own admission, couldn't track their way out of a paper bag, but their time wasn't wasted because over the 8-week course, these soldiers began to realize that in a war situation, a trained tracker can be deadly. They automatically started eliminating the sign that they had left behind, realizing this could hinder a tracker. Psychology of the quarry. Attempt to picture in your mind the party making the track. Try to get into his skin and into his mind. Your quarry may be leading the existence of a hunted animal. Don't underestimate his skill. He will be forcing himself to move very quietly and cautiously. He will be using all his skill and cunning to deceive you. Remember, the possibility of a purposely misleading trail. Remember, he may be in fear for his life and therefore a great threat to you. As you build up the information about the quarry, it is as though a transparent, ghostly image starts to take shape, and then eventually you clothe and equip the person and finally enter into his mind. When a tracker is extremely adept at this skill, he can anticipate the quarry's next move. This is not only of importance to the military or police tracker, but can be a lifesaver for the mountain rescue team. As the tracker deduces the state of mind of the person being searched for by analyzing the sign he is leaving, it is a small step from here for a tracker to foresee what decisions the victim will make at various junctures. This knowledge of the quarry helps the military or police tracker develop his sixth sense and become aware of danger as he approaches the quarry. Needless to say, this cannot be achieved in a base camp surrounded by his fellow men and all the trappings of civilization. It is a result of being in the field and tuning into the environment over prolonged periods. The five senses. Good trackers have to learn one vital lesson early on in their development. No matter how the skills are applied by hunter, conservationist, police, search and rescue, gamekeeper, or military tracker, trackers must let nothing escape their attention. It takes a good deal of practice before a potential tracker can get into the habit of noting everything before him. Development of the memory and mental process are key. Without constant training and practice, the information provided by the sign becomes difficult, if not impossible, to decipher. There seems to be no doubt that civilization has a tendency to dull all our five senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. They become dull because we are not so dependent on them, and because the opportunities for their use have been lessened. Town dwellers especially suffer in this respect. Vision is limited by walls and roofs, and sight is harmed by artificial light. Hearing is dulled by the continual grind and roar of modern traffic. Smell is clouded by the fumes of gasoline and oil that hang about the streets and by all the other pollutants associated with a modern city. Taste, which is so closely allied to smell, is very rarely fully engaged except by a few skilled trades and professions. For the tracker, all five senses are important. Sign is not confined to things that can be seen, but also includes things that can be heard, smelled, tasted, and touched. Again, not only do the senses have to record an impression automatically or subconsciously, but the tracker must train himself to remember it. An observation is useless unless it is crystallized into the memory. Observation cannot be divorced from memory if the tracker is going to benefit from the raw material of his senses have given him. Summary: the attributes of a tracker. To be a competent tracker, you must possess or develop the following qualities: patience, an inquisitive mind, honesty, perseverance, acute observation. All five senses must be well attuned: above average endurance, above average standard of fieldcraft, mental and physical determination, a good knowledge of the local fauna and flora, curiosity. Self-knowledge. A good tracker is aware of his limitations both in terms of fatigue and tracking ability. In short, he is honest with himself and others. Psychology of the quarry. Attempt to picture in your mind the party making the track. Try to get into his skin and into his mind. The five senses, sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, have to be used to note everything and then remember it.